Stropping is used to achieve any number of different goals, such as fully deburring the apex, increasing keenness and push cut capability, and even increasing the longevity of the knife between sharpenings. So, you can repair minor damage incurred from cutting, but you can only do this a limited number of times before the apex becomes too thick and too smooth, and you're required to reform a fresh apex on the stones. There's a load of different substrates you can use for stropping. We've got leather here, this is basswood, and we've got some synthetic foam, which is a purpose designed polishing pad for holding diamond abrasives, generally used for lapping. It works great. The most common one being leather. This is generally what most beginners start with and what the average person will use, generally because they haven't heard of these other ones. They all have different feedback and properties, but none of them are really abrasive without a compound on them. I know people often use like completely unloaded leather, but the amount of natural silicates in leather are really low, and there's almost no abrasive properties from stropping on the surface of it. You have to do hundreds of laps to really achieve much of anything. You can see this on the Science of Sharp website. It's an incredible blog which has a lot of information on sharpening and stropping, which mostly pertains to straight razors. But because the straight razor geometry is so thin, that if it doesn't, it's safe to assume that if it's not having a huge effect on a straight razor, it's not going to have a huge effect on much else. And Todd shows here that you can do 1 to 200 full laps on leather with a straight razor to slightly repair very microscopic damage. And what is the point? If you're watching this video, you're most likely a beginner, so you're probably going to want to start with leather, which is the cheapest option, and you can make it yourself or you can buy it, and it's fairly forgiving in comparison to a harder substrate such as wood. If you're a beginner, I strongly suggest sticking to a single grit diamond compound. A huge stropping progression isn't going to help you achieve the edge you're looking for as a beginner. Learning how to sharpen properly and strop properly is going to help you much more. As you become more advanced, you can experiment with a larger progression or a different progression, but a lot of times I will just use 1 micron and just call it a day at that. Here I have a strop, leather strop loaded with 1 micron diamond compound. I would say one of the main things when stropping is that you want to leave the strop with better performance than you started with. So that's going to involve not rounding over your apex and potentially not removing too much tooth from the apex. So basically your first thing is going to be do not strop at an angle which is greater than the one at which you sharpened. And if you don't want to remove too much tooth, then don't strop too much. We might talk about that at a later date, but we'll just do basics first. So I don't like to leave my strop on a bench. I like to hold mine. I feel that I have a bit more synergy when I've got one in each hand, and I don't hold them dead flat because this is a unnatural position to me. When I relax, my hands kind of go like this, and so I go into my relaxed position and then kind of make things parallel. But do it whatever feels comfortable for you. So my favorite way of finding the correct angle to strop at is to start more acute than I sharpened at. So let's say, we'll just use numbers, arbitrary numbers here. Let's say I sharpened at 15 degrees. I'll start stropping at 13 degrees, and I'll increase my angle until I get there. And so when you strop too acute, I can feel here that the contact feels wrong. The feedback I'm getting from the strop feels wrong. And then, this is much better than starting too obtuse because you're going to round your apex here. So I kind of start slightly too acute, and there we go, I found it. And I don't start too acute on every pass, so I just do that initially to get the feel. I think I've got a bit of something on my strop, I've just dropped on it. Another thing I do is like an S-shape movement with the tip at the front of the strop when I start. This is, I'm not sure if I've picked this up off watching someone or if it's something I've made up, but I find it helps me with certain knife shapes. Like this one, it's obviously got a very pointy tip, and if I start with the tip first and draw back this way, I'm personally quite prone to accidentally just gouge this into the strop, whereas if I pull the tip away from the strop while I'm finding my angle, I'm really unlikely to gouge the strop. So that's not something you have to do, but a lot of people have asked me why I do that, and I think that's why I'm doing it. I've kind of just done that subconsciously. So another thing is to not strop too much on one side of the knife without changing. You ideally want to keep this even. I wouldn't go stropping like 10 or 20 passes on a single side. I would generally go 3 or 4 passes, maybe 5 before switching, and as you're getting to your final stages of stropping, I'd be going one for another. Also, don't press really with any pressure at all, especially on leather. As you press into the leather, the leather will like bend and form around your apex. You'll add more convexity than you want into the apex, and you'll likely dull the edge as well. So I'm just going to kind of demo how I would strop, and I'm going to stop rambling because it's probably information overload for those new guys. So that's pretty much it for the basics. I would stick with a single compound if you're just starting out. I would probably go for leather. I wouldn't go for a suede, or well, a very coarse leather. I would stick with a light suede or grain side smooth leather. You can make it yourself. You can buy one. You could even try MDF or plywood or basswood or balsa, but it's more punishing. I certainly find I get better edges off those, but it's very punishing if you're new to stropping. Let's have a quick look at the performance of this blade after stropping. While I'm here, we'll take a quick look at the edge and also see how it cuts through Rizzler. This is very fine paper and it's quite difficult to cut. Yeah, that's incredibly smooth. Have a quick look at the mirror that we got. So this is 1 micron. I think, yes, it was 1 micron. Just 1 micron. So it was 1 micron off this. So this is a 5 micron stone. So I finished on this stone, and then I used 1 micron to strop this. That's quite a nice mirror off a fairly small amount of stropping.